Welcome.
Okay, we are now live.
Okay, welcome to a book review by Roger Lewis, CEO of Homatics. I'm a colleague of Roger's, Ranjan Balakamaran. The book is called The Property Lobby, The Hidden Reality Behind the Housing Crisis. It is about the housing crisis. Roger, you've just read this book this morning.
I read it this morning, Ranjan, yes, I really enjoyed it. On the screen share, you can see, here it is here on my screen, just so people can see the cover.
Yeah.
I'll just do this. Here it is, and it's by Bob Colenutt, and it's published by Policy Press, and it really is. It's a very good book, and there's an interesting quote here from Naomi Klein. This changes everything, a book she wrote in 2014. What concerns me is less the mechanics of the transition than the power and ideological roadblocks that have so far prevented any of them from taking place on anything close to the scale required. So that kind of sets up the theme of the book, which is that the property lobby, which Bob is calling the finance house building complex, is responsible for the housing crisis, or so-called housing crisis, in the UK. And this is a topic familiar to you and I from our modular research, our discussions on Friary Park, etc. So I went through, I read the book and I just took some extracts and formed them into a blog because I wanted us to have this discussion. And this is the blog here. So the chapters of the book, I've just said the finance house building complex. So chapter 2 is about the housing shortage. 3, the house building business. 4, financing housing investment. 5, the property lobby. Then there's shaping national housing and planning policy. Then there's the 2008 financial crash, which continues. Then there's house builders and affordable housing. Then there is how the social affordable housing sectors got swallowed. Then there's local case studies, and then there's unblocking the impasse, which is just some palliatives for the malaise. I wrote a review of this actually on Google Books, which I found it through, and I'll just read that review now. So I've written an excellent look at the UK property market. All the parameters are defined clearly, and the author's own take is refreshingly present throughout. This book, along with the RentTimperly's Generation Rent, both add significantly to the dialogue which should be happening around the housing crisis. These are questions which this reviewer's own volume house building company is actively engaged with. And then I link to our affordable home series on the Homatics Real RLD Yumpu channel. And then I say, well done, Bob Colenutt, on setting out this intractable perennial of British political economy. And it is a question in political economy and needs to be analysed as such, Ranjan.
Fair enough. Yep. People need somewhere to live, and it's not just a London problem, it's all over the country.
Indeed. And Bob points that out actually in several passages through the book. So I took screenshots of several key passages which people can read in their own time. Your friend Oliver Letwin actually makes several appearances in the critique that Bob offers up of the kind of pseudo government policy to try and set these things right. So this bit I quite like. So the same mixed messaging applies to Treasury announcements that the borrowing cap on local authorities will be lifted, potentially allowing them to borrow in order to build affordable housing for the first time in many years. The lifting of the cap has been demanded by local authorities and community housing groups for many years, with the government turning a deaf ear even as the housing crisis deepened. Then in 2018, the Chancellor of the Exchequer announced that the cap would be lifted. So that would have been Philip Hammond. This could have been a significant moment depending on the detailed conditions attached. For example, which authorities could qualify, how much could be borrowed, and whether the right to buy would apply. Predictably, the conditions were restricted and did not include removing the right to buy for new homes. It became clear that the effect of lifting the cap was overblown. Original episodes with the lifting the cap would enable 10 to 15,000 extra affordable homes a year to be built in England, but the Office of Budget Responsibility estimated that the figure was more likely to be 4,000 a year over the next 5 years, and a net increase of only 9,000 over 5 years. Given that crisis says that we need 90,000 extra social units per year, removing the cap clearly does not go anywhere near enough. And that's the old story. The budget which Rishi Sunak delivered and which I wrote a critique of, again on the Yumpu channel, again announced or foreshadowed a new approach to the right to buy scheme. My analysis of it actually showed that it was never really something that I think house builders, mortgage borrowers were ever really supposed to take seriously. It's a question of offering up policy narratives which aren't tested by results. It's just a question of saying or signaling or virtue signaling about these things and then carrying on with business as normal. And this devastating critique which Bob offers up, Bob Colenutt offers up, I'm afraid it's shot through with truth. It's a real truth bomb, similar to obviously Chloe's book, Again, which is a devastating truth bomb. And also that other report by the Empty Homes Action Group, which was, what was it? Pretty Vacant. Again, a devastating truth bomb, calling out the Robert Jenricks and housing ministers before him on their political mathematics, on their political spin, on their political, dare we say, bullshit, and so on and so forth. Now, this was a particularly nice little diagram here, which shows house building by tenure in England and Wales from 1946 to 2017. And this is the meat of our story, Ranjan. In 1946, you can see here the local authority housing provision all the way up to the peak in about 1970 was outstripping initially the private sector. The housing association sector is a little slither here between 1954 and 1958. And that in 2014-15 makes up the larger part of the affordable housing. There is no local authority, and then the rest is all private. But you can see from the peak in 1970, where there was a cumulative total of 350,000 housing starts, we're down to 150,000, of which this minuscule little slip here is the housing association effort to solve the affordable housing problem. So people like us at Home Attics and people like Minerva Smart Places, and I like Minerva Smart Places, and what they define their mission as is to actually supply genuinely affordable homes. And Bob goes into what that means. An affordable home that is rented should have security of tenure. Sure, of course it should. People should feel that, well, not feel, but actually know that their security of tenure is sacrosanct, and it won't be sort of out on the street or into hostel accommodation. If you hit the buffers or hit problems with your employment or other problems with your mental health. He also points out that there's a woeful shortage of specialist accommodation. And again, this is just not being addressed. And it hasn't been addressed by successive governments since the Margaret Thatcher government came in 1979, and since then. One of the high points actually was the John Prescott £60,000 homes competition, where a lot of good work was done in 2006. Pop went the markets in 2008. Again, a finances recession. And what happened? Homes England had a cash crisis. And these are all things that will come up now. So this is our Modular Affordable Housing Manufacturers Source Book. And in here, there are links to all the research that we at Moduloft, which is now Homatics, have put into this subject over the last year. I'd just like to read this bit here, which is another about Peach, which is a successful or it's a critique of a supposedly large regeneration project. So many tenants point out that if community or local authority-led ownership model of regeneration was used instead, council estates could be renewed without reducing the stock of affordable housing or by forcing out existing tenants. In Newham, East London, the People's Empowerment Alliance for Custom House, Peach, has developed just such a community-led model for the regeneration of their estate near the Royal Docks. This model showed that if the local authority did not sell the land to a developer, but regenerated the estate with the community in a public civic partnership that retained land in the community, there would be a much higher level of social housing and a more balanced tenure mix. Moreover, regeneration would be more locally accountable and the existing community could stay together. That's the Peach 2018. For the future of Custom House, much depends on how the local authority, Newham Council, responds to this eminently feasible proposal. Well, that is the Minerva Smart Homes approach, the Minerva Smart Places approach. It's the approach that was adopted by Trinity Buoy Wharf near my development on Orchard Place. Eric Reynolds, Eric Sorensen, who's the chairman of the board of that. The land is held in a trust and it's there in perpetuity, and it's an artist community of affordable spaces. It's an incredibly creative community, and it's there forever. There's no possibility of the sort of state monopoly crony capitalism that we've seen and analysed ourselves with Friary Park and Mount Anvil, for instance.
So has Trinity been there for 35 years then?
Trinity Buoy Wharf was started in about 1998. It was around about 1999 that I put together the whole of the site, which is now being developed out by Ballymore. We started phase 1, which is 4244 Orchard Place, and that has now become part of the City Island and what do they call it now? There's a big Ballymore development. It's all on sites that I put together. And so
you were saying that the Peach proposal was there, and then Newham, it's for them to respond, but it's a community focused idea.
Exactly, and it's proper consultation with the people at the coalface, the people who are actually living in the homes, and that's our philosophy at Homatics. That's why we work with ACU, the public consultation group. That's why we're working with people like Dominic Cunnanan of Scabble Architects. We don't pay lip service to environmental and social governance. We don't just pay lip service to having the provision of genuinely affordable housing within our placemaking. You remember a blog that I did last summer. Is 21st century Britain going to be a home-owning democracy or a rent-seeking banana republic? And under the stewardship of our great leader Boris, Grant Shapps, Half Mancock, or whatever he's called, the health bod, a banana republic it is. And it's time that at the local level, the activists, the socially conscious and creative developers in the off-site modern methods of construction field, such as ourselves with our in-house contractors, Verimatics. It's time for us to stand up to these people and show them the way, show them how it's done. And that's really what I wanted to talk to you about, and why my heart sang when I rang this book. You remember how excited I was when I read Chloe's book, when you pointed that one out to me. So yeah, with this, I return the compliment. Yeah. Now, The Emperor's New Clothes, which is financed by Sony International Pictures, produced by a guy called Winterbottom, who made one of the great movies about the financial crisis, and it stars Russell Brand. And this film has a wonderful segment of the New Era estate. Now, in the case studies that Bob has in his book, I won't go into those. People can buy the book and go into those, and I'll get it from the library and do that in their own time. But the New Era estate in Hoxton, this speaks to Chloe's chapter in the Generation Rent book, when she says about the House of Landlords instead of the House of Commons. So many of them are private landlords. So many of them are substandard landlords. So many of them have used affordability schemes by the government to effectively crowd people out of the market that require a home, the UN right to shelter. They're part of the problem. And the New Era estate, you can read this in the blog, but in Hackney Citizen, refer to Westbrook Partners, who are going to take over this estate with the help of Richard Benyon, the richest member of the Tory party at the time. I don't think he got elected in 2019, but this is absolutely the thing which is spoken to with respect to Chloe's chapter on the House of Landlords. Now, I'm just going to go back here because I've actually, yeah, here we go. Look, now I put these, when I was reading the book, I basically took screenshots and gave each of them a little heading. So this one, for instance, conclusion of the preface, conclusion. So this is the conclusion at the end of the preface. Now let's have a look. Right, here we go. This paragraph here I like, okay? The argument about why there are housing shortages comes back to two conspiracy theories. The first, from the social housing sector, is that landowners, developers, and the government are deliberately not building enough new housing to keep up prices. The second, from the finance house building complex, is that local authority planners and NIMBYs are imposing unreasonable restrictions on developers. One thing is certain, the government has tried to collapse all housing needs, housing for sale, affordable housing, and social housing into one box. Now, this is my point about the reluctant 10%ers, rungs 0 to 25, 25 to 35, 35 to 50. That's the problem that we need to solve. The top end of the market, there's no problem up there. They're all right, Jack. And that's where all the mortgage lending, or the bulk of it, is going. And that's what the major house builders do. The government asking the major house builders to solve a problem that doesn't exist for them is just absurd. And absurdity just sums up the approach of the current Johnson administration to so many social problems that we see, Ranjan. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, a few years ago, I interviewed people who were academics on the subject of geographical displacement, which was that people living in councils where they were being born, where they had been born, communities were being split because they were being told at a certain point, you can't live here anymore, so we're going to move you out to another city in another country sometimes, because there isn't enough space for you here.
Didn't they? They did that at Grenfell. They must have. Absolutely disgraceful. Yes. Yeah. Unbelievable.
So I find it believable that that the that the people that they're asking to solve the problem are the banks and the development, the housing development companies, and that they're not looking at people who want to get on the housing ladder that have basically just got a job, able to sort of, live, but not acquire a property of their own.
Yeah. So anyway, the Colenutt preface at the end. That's the second quote. I don't develop. Where are we? Right. So it's not difficult to understand why developers and landowners do not want to build social affordable housing. It reduces land costs and developer profits. But why do they not bring their land banks forward if it means that they can sell more market housing? This critical question, which goes to the heart of their business model and to the related business models of financiers, investors, and landowners, is the subject of Chapter 3. Read Chapter 3 if you read nothing else. And Chloe also talks about the finance aspects also in Generation Rent and covers it very well. Now, this is a wonderful documentary made in 1976, which talks about the precursor to the London Docklands Development Corporation. So for the sake of transparency and all the rest of it, I was very close to the LDDC. I mentioned Eric Sorensen and Trinity Boy Wharf a moment ago. Eric was the CEO of the LDDC. I knew Eric, Gareth Bendon, and Chris Pickard. I think he's Lord Pickard now. Very, very well, and had regular meetings with them. And the LDDC's achievements are quite considerable. I did a talk about those on the built environment networking thing I think it was last June or July. I gave that talk. People will find it if they look on the RLD blog. But this is a really interesting. This is the guy actually that Johnny Rotten said "you dirty old bastard" to in that famous Sex Pistols interview. It's the same guy. But it's a very interesting piece of social history about developers complaining about local authorities. And of course, it's at a time when there was much more. So this is in the run up to 79 election. It's when Jim Callaghan is the prime minister. It's after Harold Wilson's just been sidelined and all the rest of it. And there's an interesting discussion with a guy at GL Hearn. In fact, an old college friend of mine is a valuation partner at GL. Angela is a valuation partner there still, I think. And it's very interesting looking at this because it gives an idea of when the GLA was closed down, Ken Livingstone and all of that. Do you remember what a hate figure he was? Well, you're probably a bit young, but he was a real hate figure in the 70s and early 80s. And then they shut down the Greater London Council. And there are criticisms of the Greater London Council and all the rest of it, and particularly in their policies towards housing for kids in care. There are some real scandals in going back to that, which are absolutely, disgraceful episodes in the history of that institution. But in terms of planning and all the rest of it, it's quite interesting to hear this. It's on Thames Television, and it's just very interesting. That's all I say. But then this bit here, the Calcutt Review, and I've headed this a George's Christmas Carol. It's on page 52 of the electronic issue. So I'm going to read this bit now. The 2007 Calcutt Review of House Building Delivery was tasked with assessing whether the industry had a case to answer. Calcutt himself was formerly the CEO of Crest Nicholson, a major house builder from 91 to 2005, and was perhaps not the ideal person to answer this question objectively. It was no surprise, therefore, that although faced with thousands of unimplemented planning permissions and studies of slow build-out rates, his committee concluded that there was no evidence that house builders were holding on to land longer than they need. Government should take no general measures to force more rapid build-out of land banks, with implementable planning permissions. Colcutt, 2007, page 35. That's just hilarious. So anyway, with that, I put this short film, which is on the Real RLD YouTube channel, and it's For the Land Is Mine, and it's about progress and poverty, and it's about Henry George's single land tax, which is very interesting. And the other person that people should read, and it's linked to further down in this blog, is Dr. Adrian Wrigley's paper to the Treasury Committee on taxation and money and the linkage there, and effectively that coupled with the article that he wrote in the Ecologist magazine promoting a radical carbon tax, which was what it is a take on the single land tax. And of course, people like our favourites, Chester Belloc, G.K. Chesterton and L.R. Belloc and distributism, this is all really, this used to be mainstream liberal policy when Winston Churchill was in the Liberal Party. So this is liberalism when it was liberalism and not neoliberalism. And the semantics of political spin have absolutely taken the meaning out of many of the great social reform movements that shaped our society, Ranjan. And we must always remember that when we're reading these tall stories that are being served up by the Rovian actors in history, Blair Mark IIs. Did you see that interview the other day? Rishi Sunak being taken to task, had his feet to the fire with Andrew Neil, when he was just bullshitting on the question of, right, so okay,
we're doing gender equality. No, it was equality, wasn't it? Yeah, wasn't it? He was saying the Prime Minister has said we're going to have a more gender equal policy and financial, and he then said, how are you going to do that? To Rishi Sunak, and he said,
he was saying it's going to cost £1 trillion. Where's the money coming from? That will be a tax of £10,000 to every person or something. And basically Sunak went full on Blair, even with the like Blair.
So but what was the question? What was the question?
The question was about how they're going to pay for the green economy in terms of phasing out hydrocarbons by 20.
Okay, I missed it. Okay, and so what did he do?
Well, Sunak went full Blair spin. Honestly, it was almost like he'd been coached by Tony Blair to sort of, skirt around the issue. But Neil totally nailed him. He basically nailed his fingernails to the chopping board. So, and it's worth watching if you haven't seen it. So anyway. Now, the point about all of this and this sort of to and fro about financiers and house builders, this point here is a very interesting point. And I'm just going to read this bit. OK, so one aspect of the analysis of the framework driven public-private partnerships typified by the Catalyst Mount Anvil deal in Friary Park, Acton, and the loan to Mount Anvil from the GLA mayor, Sadiq Khan. Well, we've discussed that. This aspect of the modern methods construction efforts to provide more affordable housing is aptly summarized here by Jerry McCoy. And Jerry runs a US company called Entekra, who build a lot of timber steel panel constructions manufactured off site. And this is out of a very interesting report, quoting Jerry. So, home builders aren't builders. They are more land acquisition and marketing guys. They don't create project value by opening a building faster or for less money. They create value by taking a piece of property, building something, and then marketing that new thing. Their ability to do this successfully determines the overall success of that project more than any other variable. Developers need a product to market, and manufacturers can create that product and the brand to match. Now, this is something which Homatics is directly solving. because what we're doing is disrupting the volume house building market and cutting out the middleman. And who's the middleman? The middleman is the major house builders that really don't have the skill set to solve the problem of providing genuinely affordable housing. Now, genuinely affordable housing being supplied by our fleet buyers. By that I mean local authorities and people like Minerva Smart Places. Okay, within our Homatics dashboard, someone that's going to get a fleet bought home by one of our fleet buying customers, which are local authorities, housing associations, Minerva Smart Homes, okay, go into our dashboard and they specify their own personal spaces and common spaces, along with our private buyers who also qualified they're qualified not for a fleet home budget, but for an affordable mortgage which we source and underwrite, all of which is explained in my interview with David Power on the Homatics Concept Explained. Now, the other distinction that I want to make is a bit crude. There's another distinction in the two cheeks of the same arse question. The two cheeks I'm referring to there are financiers and volume house builders. Is the role played by the macro-prudential regulations of international finance. And then I refer people to a discussion on the article I wrote about the Bank of England research paper the other day, which is called Income Inequality, Mortgage Debt and House Prices.
So what did the paper say?
The paper basically was stating the bleeding obvious and trying to make it look impressive with a little bit of algebra. A few algorithms thrown in for good measure when we're all supposed to say, oh my goodness, what an algorithm, you must be so clever. And it basically makes the key point about defaults on mortgages is if it's your home and if you default, you're made homeless, you're much less likely to default. End of. Same with paying rent. If you don't pay your rent and you're likely to be homeless, you're less likely to default on your rent. The people who are more likely to default on their rent are people with second homes. So that's when you see people giving the keys back. And so a lot of the subprime mortgage market and 2008 research has missed that simple point. I mean, I've analysed this in depth, Ranjan. So I responded to that paper saying, enjoyed your paper, cure its egg, and then pointed them at some proper research. And I wrote actually to my fellow directors saying, I think my analysis from last year remains more robust than this discredited general equilibrium model approach. I'll write a critique of the paper over the weekend. Well, this is all part of that. I did do a blog on it, but the critique is within the affordable homes, a framework of understanding, which is something I wrote last summer. So, which is when we were still developing the brand as Moduloft. So, and then the next point, final point on this and about house building, building and contractors is the absolutely abject state of the contracting market in the UK. Okay, and this is the former CEO of William Very Limited. We've resurrected William Very Limited. John Gibson, the chairman and former CEO of William Very, and Thomas Solé, who they won for William Very in a joint venture with Weber House, the £60,000 house competition. Two schemes of their won, a thing called a Snake in Aylesbury, and also another smaller scheme in Hastings, which is called Soleil Muse on a former school site, and it's quite a tricky site. And I've juxtaposed that in another article I've written this weekend, which is about the Bath house, the Bathwick house, the Balfritz house, that actually two friends of mine that I was at school with in Germany, John Brunskill and Tiffany Wood. She was called Tiffany Wood when we were at school, but she's now John's wife. We were literally at school at sixth form together in an army school in Germany, in Rheindahlen. Or actually Kent School Hosse, to be more precise. It's just outside Krefeld. But anyway, the point about this point, the CAO point of Very's, I'll tell you why I mentioned Bath in a minute. Right, so this guy used to be in the electronics business, same as Michael Marks, that was the CEO of Katera, and I've done an article on Katera going tits up fair recently as well. I've been quite busy, haven't I? Come think of it. So right, here we go. Right, this is the former CEO of William Very talking about the construction business. They're very different sectors. He's referring to the electronics business because he was the sales director of Philips in the UK. So they're very different sectors, though there are some similarities even outside the processes and disciplines involved in running a multi-million-pound business. The margins are pretty tight in electronics, but they're even worse in construction. That's been the hardest part, getting my head around the enormous amount of risk contractors shoulder and the level of margins which don't seem to quite match up. Well, of course they don't match up. The major house builders are monopoly price givers. They're not a price taker in a market. And so it's a rigged market. That's what this book is about, you know, and it says rigged. It says rigged. So, and here we are, look, price fixing and public land. Page 57, Colenutt again.
So hold on, that last quote
Mm-hmm.
was confusion from someone in the electronics business about the construction business, saying it should be working better, but it doesn't.
Yeah, well, it was in Construction News, and its title is "How Jones Aims to Put the Very Brand on the Map." So this is the William Very brand, right? Well, the William Very brand is back. We own it. Yeah. John Gibson and Thomas Solé and our very exciting new contracting arm, Verymatics, which is our in-house contractor of the Homatics brand. And Homatics has 4 brands, which is Stylmatics, which is our entry-level affordable home starter home brand, and Style Plus. It's Loftmatics, which is our creative live work brand, which is very sort of a la mode, if you like, considering the rise of home working and live work space after the pandemic. And of course, the thing about that is you know, we cut our teeth building live work down at Orchard Place, where Trinity Boy Wharf is, and we've got real chops in solving this question. I mean, back in the day, our group legal counsel director, Nicola Evans, and we drafted a paper for Gordon Brown on promoting brownfield development. So, you know, what happened? Nothing happened. As usual, nothing ever happens with these guys in central government. You see, they can talk about it, and as long as they're looking like they're doing something, it's someone else's problem in a few years' time. It's musical chairs for them. They get paid anyway. They haven't got skin in the game.
What are the other two parts of your business?
The other two parts of our business are the mortgage Maxmatics business. So it's Verymatics, Mortgage Maxmatics, and then RentMatics, which is basically our affordable brand. And then we've got Silvermatics, our retirement care home brand. So that's Stylmatics and Housematics, which is our single family home brand, which is like regular housing. And so we're a placemaking solution, right? We're a gun for hire. Fleet sales for the affordable sector, for local authorities, people like the National Health. They should get us in to redevelop some of their land for them, because we place make, and we're not rent seeking placemakers, right? We're home owning democracies and secure tenancy people. We believe in a home owning and secure tenancy democracy, right? We're not up for the banana republic. You know, sure. Banana republics ain't us. You know, we're Homatics. We're driven by the customer. It's about customer choice, their choice of finance, their choice of tenure, their choice of the options within the dashboard. And it's about proper consultation with our public consultation experts, AKOU. Look it up, Tilly Harris, Dominic Pilak, their programmer of their app, Alex Dollery. Wonderful outfit. Our chairman, Chris Phillips, chairs them as well. Chris Phillips is the immediate retired chairman of Places for People. It's a very large social enterprise landlord in the UK. And he's also the chairman of My Hub, Stuart Bailey's excellent organisation. We're experts on BIM, we're experts on the circular economy, we're experts on carbon accounting, energy economics, all of that stuff. We know our onions, and we've got real form in actually solving these problems. I mean, John and Thomas, they're like the dynamic duo. They're absolutely peerless. They're our Batman and Robin of solving the housing crisis. They're proper builders. You won't hear us whining about shortages of labour or shortages of materials. We get on and solve the problems, for goodness sake. That's what you want to be doing, not casting around, oh, woe is me and all the rest of it, and picking up the odd MBE along the way, and basically knocking the people doing the work. Oh, building, it's got such bad productivity and all the rest of it. They're using a lexicon that belongs to neoliberal fascism, and not to proper market-led, customer-focused capitalism, good old-fashioned customer service. Offering a price point and the best possible price product at the best possible price for the customer. We employ proper lean principles, not lean and mean like the.
Roger,
I've written about this recently.
Roger, you said that it's a rigged game, and you were going to then go on to the next part. So the rigged game, could you just explain what you meant, and then obviously carry on with the price fixing and public land?
Well, the price fixing and public land this is just a part out of the the book. So it actually mentions a new economics foundation. I mean, it quotes Josh Ryan's Collins, who actually wrote a book with Richard Werner, funnily enough. Right, here we are. Look, let's have a look. Right, let's just read these first two paragraphs. In 2018, a survey by Competition Markets Authority found that over 40% of all firms surveyed, not just property firms, thought that the price fixing was legal, and that almost half of firms thought that it was legal to discuss prices with competing bidders. Of significance for housing is that some of the sectors listed as most vulnerable to cartels were construction, estate agents, and property management. This has all been institutionalized in the so-called frameworks mentioned in the latest paper in December, the government on construction, where they actually said that that in frameworks, preferred bidders can lead to an escalation in prices. No shit, Sherlock. It's HSE on steroids. It just really is jobs for the boys. This is a point that Michael Marks makes in a very good interview that he does on a program on Indian TV called The Young Turks, being interviewed about basically cost plus in construction. People paid fees that go up when the price goes up. That's cost plus. You don't really want that, because what's their incentive to give a good
to keep the price down,
and more value for the customer. I mean, it's not rocket science, this stuff, Ranjan, but you'd think it was to listen.
Well, it's good that he's pointing it out, because I mean, can you anyway, can you see that he's doing a different? Chloe's coming at it from the perspective of the renter. What perspective is he coming from?
Who? Bob Colenutt?
Yeah.
Well, he's critical of the system, and he sees the main villain in it as being the volume house builders. I think it's a bit more subtle than that. It's a problem that needs solving in the whole, and you need a philosophy of solving it by getting rid of the silos. I say this at the end of my Katira article. And what you have to do is put the customer front and center. You have to build to a price point and then make that cheaper. Now, these were all principles that were espoused at the beginning of Katira, but they seem to lose their way on it. And I think that's mainly because they found that being a contractor, you're a price taker from the house builders. So the house builders effectively, what this mentions is consolidation within the industry, and so you've got a monopoly purchasing power. So what you've got is basically the house builders doing the same thing to the contractors that the supermarkets do to farmers.
Okay.
If you think about it, and the consolidation,
destroying the suppliers.
Is the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. So it's create order out of chaos. So that's the it's the oldest playbook. Going out there. If you read Naomi Klein or Confessions of a
economic hitman,
and all that sort of thing, or Saskia Sarsen's paper, which we're coming to. So anyway, after this, I linked to a few things that occur to me on this price fixing, particularly one from John Ruskin in the Veins of Wealth. So there's the famous Adam Smith one about when people get together, they discuss prices and all the rest of it. And that's a quote from Wealth Nations. But this is my favorite quote on the same thing. This is Ruskin in Veins of Wealth. Pardon me, men of business do indeed know how they themselves made their money, or how on occasion they lost it. Playing a long practice game, they are familiar with the chances of its cards and can rightly explain their losses and gains, but they neither know who keeps the bank of the gambling house, nor what other games may be played with the same cards, nor what other losses and gains far away among the dark streets are essentially, though invisibly, dependent on theirs in the lighted rooms. They have learned a few and only a few of the laws of mercantile economy, but not one of those of political economy. Which, I mean, that kind of sums up the darkened row, away in the darkened rooms, away from where the light is shone, market rigging, price fixing, political intrigue. I mean, you only have to look at some of the stuff that John Ward has mentioned on the slog recently. I'm looking forward to reading part 2 of the Matt Hancock deconstruction. Some of the PPE contracts. The head of the Jockey Association got a PPE contract or whatever for a very large contract, and surprise, she'd made a £60,000 contribution in the members register, all the rest of it, to Mount Hancock last year. It's woeful. Banana Republic stuff. Very disappointing. So then it goes into the house building business, which is this point about so my point about the house building business is that the contractors are price takers, not price givers, and the margins are very bad. And that's the point made on the William Very guy when he took over as CEO and joined from Philips as sales director. And then you see, so it goes on. There's the stuff talking about residual valuations, about valuation being an art and not a science. You can prove almost anything with a valuation. I'm a valuer, it's true. That's not necessarily a weakness. I wrote a paper a long time ago now about, or some notes on mortgages, securitization, repossession, foreclosure, and the sort of skullduggery that goes on. Then this is my review of Generation Rent, where I read the chapter The House of Landlords. And then then we come to the scramble for land, which is something which I was wrapping off this land capture stuff, value capture, and this residual land values valuation dark arts in the Colenutt book. Okay, and the reason I went there to the Saskia Sassen thing is that he mentioned Saskia. The second change is the one charted brilliantly by Saskia Sassen, 2014. She identified a major shift in global land ownership beginning in 2006, when there was a sharp increase in foreign acquisitions of rural land for food crops, leading to the expulsion and disempowerment of rural communities. Since the 2008 financial crash and the recession, she has identified a further shift, a global scramble for urban land for security and as a long-term investment. She sees this as a step change, an out-of-the-ordinary increase in strategic land acquisition, signalling a new alignment of power in land and housing markets. She calculates that in 100 global cities, foreign buyers are accumulated $1 trillion of investment in land and property every year. This includes vacant and derelict industrial land that is relatively cheap, but significantly, with the right kind of pressure on the government, has potential for upmarket housing. Governments desperate for inward investment, including the UK, are backing this process, often with tax incentives and public funding for land reclamation and transport infrastructure. Later in this book, we single out an example of the globalised land grab in the development of the Greenwich Peninsula, a former gas board site in South London. Right, this is brilliant. Right, the UK opens its doors to overseas property investors in a big way, offering generous tax breaks for overseas investors. That's Liz Airy, 2011, reported that foreign ownership of the City of London rose from 6% in 72 to whatever it then goes on to say. And then I linked to this paper, a savage sorting of winners and losers, contemporary versions of primitive accumulation. So this is the point I was telling you about earlier, about my correspondence on the Alluation blog with someone who glories in the nom de plume Anchard, and it's a wonderful paper, and I've quoted some of the bits, but let me just read this bit here. Where are we? There's a very powerful bit. Access to. I'll go on forever if I start reading this, actually, so I'm not going to. But it is very on point, and I did a blog about that back in 2011 called "Democracy and the State," based on that Sassen paper. Here we are. Coercive agitation of the plot.
So hold on. You were saying that foreign ownership or foreign bidding for land in London, for example, was skyrocketing at a certain stage, and then you were saying something about Saskin, and then coming into this.
Well, she analysed the 2008 financial crisis and stuff that happened following that, with the bailouts, TARP in the States, quantitative easing, the whole 9 yards, the
right.
EU.
And what was special about her analysis?
What was really special about it was that it compared the liberalisation in emerging economies, what used to be called the third world, but emerging poorer countries, higher debt countries, and it actually showed how the same confessions of an economic hitman type of things were now being applied actually at home in developed economies. And so this is what the Bilderberg group discussed. I think it was the one that was in England a few years back. There was an item called the precariat, and the precariat is it a mistake or is it on purpose? And one suspects it's on purpose, because obviously people that are living from paycheck to paycheck don't go on strike, don't give the boss, they take orders nicely. It's not a very democratic way of looking at stuff. But Saskia Sassen calls that out, and the paper develops the argument in a very structured, logical, and devastating way, Ranjan. It's a devastating paper, absolutely devastating.
And do you think that her doing that in that way, and you highlighting that, how does that fit into Homatics?
Well, Homatics, you remember about 3 or 4 years ago, I sort of said, look, to prove some of the stuff that I'm saying, I'm just going to have to come out of retirement and get my site boots back on, get my harbo, get my developers sort of, persona on and just go back into bat.
Yeah.
And so that's it. I've gone back into bat and we're starting to put some runs on the board now. But we're going to have a nice knock here. We're going to get up a century or two. And, hopefully then other people will see, right, okay, that's the way to do it. And we're going to open source our dashboard for affordable, genuinely affordable housing and all the rest of it. The solution to this problem is actually found in the proper allocation of credit. You need to read the work of Per Kagowski, the ex-director of the World Bank. He's Venezuelan, he's from. He's married to a Swede, like I am, and spends his time in Washington, D.C. mainly. But Per has been going on about this. It's the macro-prudential framework is stopping bankers from doing proper banking. I'm not knocking banking as an institution or bankers generally. It's an important service that they offer the economy. But as Steve Keen points out, is when banking profits make up a percentage of, I think it's when it gets to over 6%, and it's something like 10% at the moment, it ceases to be useful. It becomes parasitic on the host at that point. And financialized neoliberalism reached that point already, probably during the dot-com bubble. And it's only got worse since then. And that's something that Steve Keen points out. Yanis Varoufakis is quoted in this book. Josh Ryan's Collins is quoted in this book. My old mate Richard Werner, I don't think was unless I missed it, I don't think he was quoted, but I quote him extensively in all my research. So anyway, look, let's wrap up. Look, it's 56 minutes. I'm going to read this poem by Pushkin, which is actually part of the introduction to my creation, Creorder Out of Chaos extraction. So this is Exegi Momentum by A.S. Pushkin, translated by A.Z. Foreman. And this is a Bible quote. We heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. So that's Mark, the Gospel of Mark. It's Sunday, isn't it? It's very apt. I've got shivers in the back of my spine on that now. So here's Pushkin's poem. I've reared a monument not built by human hands. The public path to it cannot be overgrown. Within submissive head far loftier it stands than Alexander's columned stone. No, I shall not all die, my soul in hallowed birth. Of art shall brave decay, and from my dust take wing. And I shall be renowned while on this mortal earth a single poet lives to sing. Tidings of me shall spread through all the realm of Rus, and every tribe in her shall name me as they speak. The haughty western pole, the east's untamed Tungus, North Finns and the south steppes Kalmuk. And long shall I a man dear to the people be, for how my lyre once quickened kindly sentiment. I, in a tyrant age, who sang of liberty and mercy toward fallen men. To God and his commands pay thou good heed, O Muse. To praise and slander both be nonchalant and cool. Demand no laureate's wreath, think nothing of abuse, and never argue with a fool. A bit of Pushkin. Gotta like a bit of Pushkin, haven't you? I think
first time I've heard any.
Oh, is it? Oh, Pushkin is he's well worth the effort. Right, we're done. Let's go off and we'll have a little think.
Yeah.
Send them homeward to think again. So I'm going to end and we can keep talking. Don't worry, this won't end us. So if you have been, I've been Roger Lewis. This has been Ranjan Balamakurumaran. And if you have been, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.